For the JavaScript demos in this module, we'll create a SharePoint 2013 app that will install into this developer site here. So let's come over to Visual Studio and let's create a new project. And then under Office and SharePoint Apps, we'll create an app for SharePoint 2013. We'll call our app the JavaScript demo. Click OK. Just change the title here. That's the appropriate URL for our developer site. And we want this to be a SharePoint hosted app. Initially, we're presented with the default page for the app. So this lives in the Pages folder, default.aspx. And if we take a look inside of this file, we'll see there's several script references. So the two script references that are important in terms of the client object model are sp.js and sp.runtime.js. These are two of the three core libraries for the client object model. The third is sp.core.js. And if you notice where these live, they live in the layouts folder for the SharePoint 2013 system root. So if we go over to that folder, so I'll go to the Web Server Extensions 15, and then underneath there we'll go to Template, and then Layouts, and then we'll scroll down to where the S's are, and we'll find that there are many, many files that begin with sp dot. These are the libraries that make up the JavaScript implementation of the client object model. We'll take a look at several of these libraries as we go throughout the demos during this course. Two other important libraries in our default ASPX are jQuery. So this is obviously not part of the client object model, but it's important. We'll be using it during our JavaScript coding. And then the other is the reference to effectively the code behind for the page, which is app.js. And you notice both of these libraries live in the scripts folder. So if we come over to our Solution Explorer, there's our scripts folder. There is the jQuery library, and then there is app.js. Now, we don't need any of the boilerplate code that's included automatically for us in app.js, so let's just go ahead and delete that. And then we'll come over to our default page, and we'll scroll down to the main placeholder, and we'll add a button we'll use to kick off our demo. So this is an input, and the ID is going to be equal to load button. And the type of this input is going to be a button. And finally, the text that we want to show on the button is going to be equal to load. All right, so now we can come back over to our code behind page, and we'll use jQuery to create our document ready function. And in here, what I want to do is when the page is ready, I just want to attach the click event handler to our button. So I'll say here jQuery, and then we'll use the selector to get the load button. And then we want to add the click event handler, and we'll call this guy using load. And then down below here, we'll create the actual using load function. And here's where we'll put the event handling code for our button. So when we click the button, we want to do the same thing we did in the managed version of the demo. We want to show the title of the web and how many lists there are. So the first thing we're going to need is a client context. So I'm going to say here var context is equal to. Now, unlike the managed version of the demo, I don't need to create a new client context. This is a SharePoint hosted app. I'm living in SharePoint, so it already knows the context. So I'm just going to go get the current context. So it's sp.clientContext and then .getCurrent. All right, so that gives me access to the current context. Then I need a variable to represent the current site. So var web is equal to context dot get web. And then I need to load the web, just like we did before. So context.load, passing in the web. And now I need to call my execute query. So context.execute query. Now notice in the JavaScript implementation, it's not execute query, it's execute query async. So for the JavaScript and Silverlight implementations of the client object model, the calls out to the web service have to be done asynchronously. So we're going to have the call to execute query async as opposed to just execute query, and we're going to have callbacks for when the call succeeds or if the call fails. So for these, I'll just say we'll have a callback called success and a callback called fail. So our success callback is where we'll write out the web title, and the fail callback will just put out the error message we get returned from the service. Now to write out the web title, we need some kind of UI element on our page, and it just so happens that there's one given to us. It's there as part of the boilerplate code for the SharePoint hosted app, so we'll just use it. So we'll come back over here and we'll use jQuery to get a reference to that guy. So we'll say here var message is equal to jQuery, and then we'll use the selector to get access to it or get a reference to it. And then we'll set its text, so that's message.text equal to the web, and then get underscore title. Get underscore title. All right, so now I can hit F5 to go and deploy out the app, and then start it up and start debugging it. There we go, and there's our load button. So if we click that, we should get JavaScript demo, and that's exactly what we get. Now we also want the count of the lists. So what I can do here is say message.append, and then let's fire in a break tag here, and then finally message.append, and then we want web.getLists, and then from there we want to get the count. Okay, now I haven't initialized, or I haven't loaded the lists property, right? So let's just see what happens when we go and run this guy. Click the load button. Back here, right? We get a JavaScript runtime error. The collection has not been initialized. So exactly what we expected, right? So let's just go ahead and continue, and then let's stop debugging here. And to solve this problem, we'll use the same technique we did before with one small difference. Last time we loaded the list property for the web object in place. We can't do that in the client object model because the properties are implemented as getter and setter methods. So we just need to create a variable here. So I'll say var lists is equal to web.getLists. And then down here, I'll say context.load lists, and then finally I'll just come in here and use this variable instead of the list property. So with those changes made, we can go ahead and hit F5 to run our app, and then now we can click our load button, and you can see we get the title of the app and then how many lists live in the app itself. That's a very small number. It's just 2. So that's how to retrieve resources using the load method. Now we're going to take a look at how we can do something similar using the load query method.